The sound of gunfire echoed long after the range had gone quiet. Jack Turner's finger still hovered over the trigger of his old M4. The barrel pointed downrange at a row of shattered bottles and dented metal plates. Smoke curled upward, blurring the Texas heat into a wavering haze. He didn't fire for practice anymore. He fired because silence made him uneasy. Ranger lay in the dust behind him, tongue out, golden eyes fixed on his handler. The German shepherd didn't flinch at the shots. He'd lived through worse beside Jack across continents and deserts that never forgot the smell of blood and cordite. Jack dropped the rifle to the bench and exhaled. His shoulders were tight, his knuckles white. There was an old rhythm in his hands, check, clear, clean, that gave him peace when the world didn't. But today, even that rhythm couldn't keep the restlessness away. The phone buzzed on the work table, its sharp vibration cutting through the heavy afternoon air. Unknown number, Maine area code. No one called from Maine. He hesitated before answering, his thumb hovering over the screen. For a heartbeat, he considered letting it ring out. Then instinct, discipline, maybe guilt, made him swipe the green icon. Turner. Jack. It's Tom. Tom Holloway. The name hit like a faint echo from another life. The old man who ran the hardware store near the docks, whose hands smelled of rope and salt. His father's friend. Jack straightened without realizing it. "Mr. Holloway," he said quietly, "it's been a long time." A sigh, rough as gravel, crackled through the speaker. "Too long, son. I wish this was a better reason to call. It's your father, Henry. He's gone, Jack." Jack froze. His heartbeat didn't even change pace. He just stared at the dirt floor, the sun slicing through the slats in the barn wall, catching the thin smoke still hanging in the air. When? This morning. Heart gave out in his sleep. Doctor said it was peaceful. Peaceful. Jack almost laughed. His father had never done anything peacefully. He'd lived like the sea itself, cold, relentless, and full of hidden depths. Tom kept talking. "The town office will handle the arrangements, but the house, well, you're his only kin. It needs sorting. I figured you should hear it from me, not the sheriff." Jack rubbed the bridge of his nose, eyes shut. "I see. I'm sorry, son. Your dad was yeah." Jack cut in, his voice flat. He was what he was. Silence lingered on the line, an old man's discomfort meeting a younger man's indifference. "Bar Harbor hasn't changed much," Tom said finally. "Neither has the house. You should come up, Jack. Sometimes the living need to bury more than the dead." The line went dead before Jack could answer. He stood in the quiet barn phone, still in his hand. The light had shifted gold, now softer, but the air felt heavier. Ranger stirred, sensing something wrong. The dog whined low, crawled to Jack's side, pressing his head against his leg. Jack looked down, his jaw clenched tight. "He never said goodbye," he muttered. "Just left the porch light on for 15 years. Ranger tilted his head, waiting for a command that didn't come. That night, the house felt too still. Jack sat at the kitchen table, disassembling and oiling the rifle out of habit, not need. Every sound, the faint tick of the ceiling fan, Ranger's breathing on the tile, seemed amplified. He tried to picture his father lying dead in that coastal house, the one perched on the cliffs above the Atlantic. He couldn't. The old man had always seemed unbreakable, carved from salt and iron. The kind of man who could survive a storm by staring it down. Jack hadn't seen him since he was 20, the day he left for the army. No phone calls, no visits, no letters. The silence had become its own kind of war, one that neither man seemed willing to end. He ran a cloth through the rifle barrel. His reflection stared back in the dark, metal hollow eyes, short hair, the faint scar on his jawline. A man built for orders, not emotions. 3 days, he said aloud, setting the weapon aside. We drive up, pack the house, sign the papers, and we're gone. That's it. Ranger's tail thumped once against the floor. Agreement or loyalty? Maybe both. The drive north took 2 days. Flatland gave way to forests, then endless gray highways that smelled like rain. Jack said little. Ranger slept most of the way, occasionally lifting his head when Jack muttered to the radio or cursed at traffic. By the time they crossed into Maine, the sky had turned steel-colored, and the air carried that sharp coastal tang he hadn't smelled in years. The smell of his childhood, of Net's diesel and his father's silence. Bar Harbor appeared just as he remembered it, tight streets, cedar-shingled houses, fishing boats bobbing in the cold water. Time didn't move fast here. It lingered. Jack parked outside Holloway's Hardware. The same hand-painted sign hung over the door. The same bell jingled when he stepped inside. Tom Holloway looked older, his beard white, his hands still as broad and scarred as driftwood. His eyes softened when he saw Jack. "You came," Tom said simply. Jack nodded. "Didn't plan to stay long." "That's what they all say." Tom wiped his hands on a rag. "He left things neat, you know. Just quiet. Like he was expecting you." Jack frowned. "He never expected anything from me." Tom gave him a look that carried years of unspoken truth but didn't argue. "Keys are under the front step, same as always." He hesitated. "Jack, the house, it's been empty a long time. Feels strange in there. You take care." Jack forced a thin smile. "I've been in worse places." When he left the store, the clouds had thickened over the harbor, heavy with the promise of rain. The wind off the water tasted like rust and memory. He turned down the gravel lane toward the bluff. The house rose from the hill like a weathered skeleton, 2 stories of graying wood shutters, half rotten, the paint stripped away by salt and storms. The porch creaked beneath his boots, the sound echoing into the emptiness. Jack reached under the same loose stone and found the key cold, rusted, familiar. He hesitated before sliding it into the lock. The door opened with a sigh. The smell hit first dustwood and something else. Solitude. Inside, the air was thick and stale. The old furniture sat under white sheets like ghosts. His mother's photograph still hung above the mantel, smiling in a way no one had since. Jack dropped his duffel by the door. Ranger padded in behind him, nose twitching, tail low. "Welcome home, boy," Jack murmured. His voice barely carried. He wandered through the rooms, kitchen, living room, hallways, all frozen in time. Each creak of the floorboards sounded like a whisper from the past. He stopped at the stairs leading down to the basement. The door at the bottom was shut tight. Ranger stood at the top step, staring down, ears pinned back. Jack frowned. "What is it, oh?" The dog didn't move. His fur bristled. A low growl rumbled deep in his throat. Jack felt the back of his neck prickle. He stared into the dark space below where the smell of damp and old wood drifted up. "Nothing down there," he muttered, turning away. But Ranger didn't stop staring. That night the rain came hard. It beat against the windows, a steady percussion that filled the hollow house. Jack couldn't sleep. The air was too thick, the memories too loud. He sat in the old armchair, nursing black coffee gone cold, listening to the wind howl through the eaves. Ranger paced restlessly, nails clicking on the floorboards. When Jack finally drifted off, He dreamed of water, dark, endless water, and a faint knocking beneath it, as if something hidden was trying to get out. He woke before dawn, breath sharp in his throat. Ranger stood at the basement door, again paw raised, tapping softly at the wood. The sun hadn't risen yet. The house was gray, caught between night and day. Jack stared at the dog for a long time before speaking. "All right," he said quietly. "You win tomorrow." He didn't know why he said it. Maybe because part of him already knew whatever waited in that basement wasn't just about his father's death. It was about the silence that had swallowed both of them whole. And tomorrow he was going to break it. Jack stood on the threshold of the basement door just after sunrise, holding a rusted flashlight and a stale breath in his chest. The hardwood beneath him groaned like an old wound. Behind him, Ranger sat like a statue, gaze locked on the door, ears flicking forward. The storm had passed, leaving behind a fog that hung low over the coast, a dense curtain between this house and the rest of the world. He turned the knob slowly. It squeaked as if protesting the act. When the door creaked open, a cold draft rolled up from below like breath from a deep cavern. Dust drifted in the shaft of morning light that bled down the stairwell. The smell was stronger here, mildew, old wood, and something faintly metallic. Jack clicked on the flashlight. The beam shook as he moved it across the steps, then down the hallway at the bottom, ending at a shut basement door he didn't remember ever noticing before. He descended each step, moaning under his boots. Ranger didn't follow. The basement was the kind of place memories went to die. Boxes lined the walls, some labeled, most not. Old furniture, tools, and fishing gear cluttered the corners like an unspoken eulogy for another life. He shined the light along the far wall and paused. That section looked off. Not just dirty, different. The wood was newer, less stained, slightly bowed like it had been placed over something. Jack moved closer. His boots scraped against the concrete, echoing softly. The flashlight revealed seams barely visible, but there forming a subtle outline of a false panel. His pulse quickened. He set the flashlight on a nearby workbench, pried at the edge with an old flathead screwdriver, and after some resistance, the panel popped free with a quiet snap. Beyond it, darkness, and something more. A breath of air escaped from the opening, dry and oddly warm. Jack reached into the dark and found a pull chain. He gave it a yank. A single bulb blinked to life. What it revealed made him take a step back. This wasn't a basement. It was a cathedral carved in wood. The hidden room stretched wider than he expected, 20, maybe 30 feet deep. The walls were lined with meticulously organized tools, shelves of varnish, rows of wood planks sorted by type and length. A heavy oak workbench stood in the center like an altar. Above it, pinned to a corkboard, were blueprints, sketches, handwritten notes, and photos, many of which were yellowed, but perfectly intact. Everything was pristine, as if someone had cleaned it just yesterday. As if someone had been waiting. Jack stepped inside, careful not to disturb anything. His boots echoed softly against the smooth concrete floor. There was no dust here, no cobwebs. It was the cleanest place in the entire house. He ran his fingers over the bench surface, finding tiny indentations, cuts from chisels, gouges from carving tools. This was no hobby shop. This was something sacred. On the bench sat a leather-bound notebook. The edges were frayed, the cover dark with time and sweat. Jack opened it. Started cabinet work. Mary always wanted oak. His mother's name. He turned the page. Drawer warped again. Red oak's temperamental needs patience. Jack's the same. His heart seized in his chest. He flipped forward page after page. Some were purely instructional sketches of joints, notes on wood grain lists of tools. But between them were small, almost hidden messages, observations, frustrations, regrets. Jack used to sit on the stairs and watch me work. Didn't say much. Neither did I. I wanted to show him something solid, something that wouldn't break. I just didn't know how. The words stung more than any argument they'd ever had, because they weren't meant to be read. They were never shouted across a room or slammed into a doorframe. They were the thoughts of a man who carried everything inside and built his feelings in pine and ash. Jack closed the notebook gently. His fingers were trembling. He wandered deeper into the room, inspecting each corner. There were half-finished pieces of furniture, chairs, cabinet doors, a table with 3 legs. A shelf full of carving tools stood like soldiers in formation. Then he saw it. In the farthest corner, a large object draped in canvas. He didn't uncover it. Not yet. Instead, he stood in the center of the room, trying to make sense of it all. The man he'd known, gruff, closed off, impossibly distant, had built this world beneath his feet. Not for money, not for show, for himself. And maybe for Jack too. Back upstairs, the air felt heavier, more suffocating. Ranger finally came down from the top step and sniffed at Jack's pant leg. "You knew something was off, didn't you?" Jack murmured, petting his head. The dog huffed, then turned his attention toward the hallway window. Outside, the fog was thinning. The gray silhouette of the ocean was visible again. Boats bobbed gently in the harbor, and beyond them, the faint outline of the old lighthouse stood steady on its rocky perch. Jack stared out the window for a long time. "It's like this place held its breath the day I left, and never let it go." He didn't expect an answer, but somehow in the quiet that followed, he felt like one had been given. That evening, he sat at the old dining room table, the journal beside a cold cup of coffee. He thumbed through more pages, each one anchoring him deeper into a past he thought he'd abandoned. A particular note caught his eye, dated roughly a year after Jack left home. Tom said Jack made it through basic. Didn't write, but that's okay. I'm still building. Still building. Jack closed the journal and leaned back. The light from the chandelier flickered above him, casting long shadows across the room. He hadn't planned to stay more than 3 days. Now he wasn't sure if he could leave until he uncovered everything this house and his father had hidden. He glanced at the basement door again. Behind it, the workbench, the tools, the dustless air, and the canvas-covered shape in the corner. Something about it tugged at him, a whisper he couldn't yet hear clearly. Tomorrow, he told himself. One layer at a time. But before that, he needed answers. Someone who had known Henry Turner better than Jack ever did. Someone who'd seen the man beneath the silence. He stood, stretched his stiff back, and glanced at the clock on the wall. Time to visit the library, and maybe Claire Benson. She always knew more than she let on, and she never forgot anything. The bell above the library door jingled as Jack stepped inside, and the scent of old paper and polished wood hit him like a memory. It smelled the same as when he was 12, when he used to hide between the rows of shelves to escape the silence at home. Only now the air felt warmer, softer, like it belonged to someone who gave a damn. The place was quiet, except for the soft hum of a floor fan in the corner. Morning light streamed through the tall windows, cutting across the tables in long, golden bands. Jack stood there for a second, unsure if he belonged. Ranger waited outside, tied to a post tail, wagging slowly as he watched the door. A figure stepped out from behind a shelf. "Didn't think I'd ever see you here again," said Claire Benson, holding a worn copy of To Build a Fire and giving him a lopsided smile that somehow hadn't changed since high school. She looked older, sure. A few gray strands threaded her chestnut hair, and worry lines carved gentle curves around her eyes, but there was something untouched about her. Grounded. Real. Jack raised an eyebrow. "Is that a welcome or a warning?" Claire laughed, and it broke the stiffness in his shoulders. "Depends on what kind of visitor you're planning to be." He glanced around the room. "Just passing through. Figured I'd see if you had anything on woodworking." Claire quirked an eyebrow. "Since when do you care about woodworking?" "Since I found out my father might have been a better craftsman than a parent." Her smile faded slightly, replaced by a kind of quiet curiosity. "You found the workshop, didn't you, Jack?" Blinked. "You knew about it?" "I didn't know, no. But he used to come in here every couple weeks. Always checked out books on joinery cabinetry, sometimes rare furniture design." She turned toward a shelf and walked, expecting him to follow. He never talked much, but he wasn't just browsing. He studied. Jack followed her through the rows. "You never said anything to him about me, I mean." "I tried once," she said, reaching for a thick volume and handing it to him. "Said your name." He looked like I'd slapped him. Not angry, just gutted. "So I stopped bringing you up." Jack opened the book, pretending to read, but the words blurred. He never called. Not once in 15 years. Claire leaned against the shelf, folding her arms. "Sometimes silence says more than screaming ever could." That line hit Jack square in the chest. He looked up. "You're not just talking about him, are you?" She held his gaze, then shrugged. "You ghosted this whole town, Jack. Some of us noticed." He swallowed hard. "I thought it'd be easier." "For who?" The question hung in the air between them, heavier than it had any right to be. Jack ran a hand through his hair. "I found his journal. The woodshop's still intact, like he was still working, like he was waiting for something." Claire tilted her head. Maybe he was waiting for forgiveness. Or maybe just someone to finish what he started. Jack muttered, then shut the book and handed it back. "I'm still trying to figure out what that is." Claire hesitated, then reached into the drawer behind the front desk and pulled out a folded slip of paper. "This came in through interlibrary loan. He ordered it a few months ago, never picked it up. I kept it." She handed it to him. Jack unfolded it. It was a hand-drawn sketch of a lighthouse crib. Delicate, intricate, beautiful. The signature at the bottom, H. Turner. He was building something, Claire said gently. Something he never got to finish. Jack stared at the page. "A crib," he whispered. He was building a crib. Claire watched him closely. For who Jack didn't answer. Couldn't. Memories hit like shrapnel, Sarah. The ultrasound appointment. He missed the apartment they barely lived in, the fight that ended everything. He hadn't told anyone. Not even Henry. He hadn't wanted to explain how badly he'd failed. He folded the sketch carefully and slipped it into his jacket. "I have to go back," he said quietly. "Of course you do," Claire replied. "But when you're ready, come back again." Jack looked at her, really looked at her. Why? Because some stories are only worth reading when the author's still around to rewrite the ending. He gave a small, weary smile. "You always talk like you're quoting something." She smiled back. "That's what happens when you spend your life around people who are dead but still have something to say." He nodded once, turned, and left the library. Outside, Ranger stood up immediately, tail wagging in slow rhythm. Jack untied the leash and gave him a scratch behind the ears. I think we've got more to uncover, he said. Ranger barked once softly, like agreement. Back at the house, Jack returned to the basement. The air still held that same preserved silence like it had been vacuum-sealed. He crossed the room, the sketch burning in his pocket, and finally approached the canvas-covered object in the corner. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled the cloth away. There it was. The crib. Unfinished but exquisite. Smooth arcs shaped into the curves of waves. Tiny carvings of whales and seagulls danced along the side panels. The headboard was taller than normal, with an outline half carved into its center, a lighthouse just beginning to take form. Jack's knees nearly gave out. He sank to the stool beside it, staring at the piece like it might breathe. What had his father been thinking carving this? Was it hope, redemption? An apology in oak, Jack ran his fingers along the edge, touching the grooves. He recognized the grain, the detail, the patience. He saw Henry in it, and in a way, he saw himself. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the sketch Claire had given him, lining it up with the piece in front of him. It matched. His father had a plan. Jack had found the starting line. Now he just had to decide if he was brave enough to cross it. That night the wind was back. It scraped across the windows and howled under the door like a voice trying to be heard. Jack didn't sleep. Instead, he stayed in the basement, cataloging every tool, every note, every drawing. The journal lay open beside him, waiting for a next page that had never been written. He didn't know what came next. But maybe someone else did. There was still one man in town who knew how the accident was really handled, who'd stood beside Henry Turner in the quiet aftermath of a storm Jack had caused. Sheriff Mike Donnelly. Jack closed the journal, the pages soft with age. Tomorrow he'd find Mike, and maybe finally get the truth his father never told him. The sheriff's office was tucked between the town's bait shop and an antique bookstore, both closed on Mondays, giving the small building a lonely, almost forgotten feel. Jack pushed the door open and stepped inside. The space was dim, lined with wood paneling and the smell of brewed coffee and old paper. Sheriff Mike Donnelly looked up from behind his desk, squinting at Jack for a moment, before recognition settled in. He rose slowly, bones creaking, the kind of movement that belonged to someone who'd carried too much weight over the years. "Well," Mike said. "Jack Turner back in the flesh." Jack gave a nod, short and guarded. "Figured we ought to talk." Mike motioned toward the worn leather chair across from him. "About your old man, about everything," Jack said, and sat. The sheriff poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot that had likely been simmering since dawn. He slid one toward Jack, then leaned back in his creaking chair. "You found the shop, didn't you?" Mike asked. Jack nodded. "Did you know about it?" "I knew he built things. Never saw it myself. But Henry came by for sanding belts and carving blades once a month like clockwork. Quiet about it. Said it kept his hands busy." Jack stared down into his coffee. He wasn't the type to build anything gentle. He wasn't the type to care. Mike snorted. "That's where you're wrong." Jack looked up, brows tight. Mike let out a sigh. "Your dad wasn't perfect. Hell, sometimes he was damn near impossible. But that man loved you in a way he didn't know how to say out loud." Jack didn't respond, but the words hung in the air like salt spray off the sea sting, first meaning later. The sheriff continued slower now. "He came to me the night of the accident. You were 17, barely breathing through the panic. Said you were driving the truck that ran through the Palmer family's fence. That little girl almost—" "I know what happened," Jack cut in, voice low. Mike nodded solemnly. "He didn't blame you. Not once, but he blamed himself for not being there. Said a man's job is to protect his boy from becoming a ghost before his time. Jack's throat tightened. He never said a word about any of it. Because he didn't want you to carry it, Mike said. He paid the restitution out of his own pocket. Sold that boat of his, the Sea Whisper. Took a second mortgage on the house. Even made monthly payments on the hospital bills under a false name so you'd never find out. Jack leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His fingers curled into fists. Why go through all that and never tell me Mike studied him for a long time? Because that's the kind of man Henry Turner was. Silent as the tide, but steady. He believed real love doesn't ask for credit. It just shows up and stays. Jack stared at the floor. His father had sacrificed everything, and he'd walked away thinking the man hated him. Mike tapped his fingers on the desk. He told me once, said, if the boy ever comes back, don't tell him I saved him. Tell him I was just trying to make room for him to build something better. Jack swallowed hard. He left me a workshop full of half-built memories. Then maybe it's your turn to finish one, Mike said quietly. Jack stood slowly. Thanks for the coffee. Mike nodded once. You planning on staying? I don't know yet, Jack said. But I'm not leaving today. Back at the house, Jack descended into the basement again. Ranger padded behind him, this time calmer now, as if the space had accepted their presence. The smell of sawdust lingered in the air, like an old perfume, rich, earthy, oddly comforting. Jack moved to the workbench, fingers brushing against the crib's unfinished edges. He opened the leather-bound journal again and flipped to a marked page. Woke up dreaming about waves. Mary used to say, the sea never forgets. Maybe wood doesn't either. Jack traced the words like they were carved into him. This wasn't just furniture. It was confession. He pulled open the bottom drawer beneath the bench. Inside were dozens of tiny carvings, test pieces, practice runs, even failed attempts. Among them he found one that made him pause. A miniature carving of a lighthouse. Half of it chipped, the windows rough. But the shape was unmistakable. He held it up to the crib's headboard. It matched the half-formed design there like a puzzle waiting for someone to finish it. He exhaled slowly. This wasn't a basement, he whispered. It was a cathedral carved in wood. Jack gathered tools with methodical purpose. Mallet, chisel, fine-grained sandpaper. The movements were clumsy at first, fingers stiff, angles off. But he kept going. By sunset, he'd carved one wave. Just one. But it was his. That night, he didn't sleep upstairs. He pulled an old army cot into the basement, set it beside the workbench, and let Ranger curl up beside him. The house didn't feel cold anymore. Morning came with soft rain tapping the windows. Jack sat with coffee in one hand and his father's journal in the other. The next entry read, Jack called today. Didn't say much, but it was more than I deserved. Jack ran his thumb over the ink, heart aching. He never made that call, which meant Henry had written a hope into existence and waited for it to become real. Suddenly, Jack needed air. He climbed the stairs, pulled on his jacket, and stepped outside into the drizzle. He walked the short path down to the dock, the same dock his father had fished from for 30 years. The water lapped against the shore in gentle rhythm, gray sky reflected in the calm. He stood there for a long time, the lighthouse blinking in the distance, the sea endless and ancient at his feet. There was peace in it, and weight. When he returned to the house, a new kind of clarity had settled behind his eyes. He grabbed the blueprint Claire had given him, spread it on the workbench, and pinned it beside the journal. One crib, one story. one way forward. But first there was one more person who might know the full story behind the crib and the child it was meant for. Claire. She knew his father. She'd known Jack once too, and maybe she still did. The rain had passed by the time Jack pulled up in front of Claire's cottage on Seaside Lane. The gray sky had cracked open just enough to let in a sliver of light, and the air smelled of wet pine and salt. Ranger sat in the passenger seat, nose pressed to the window, ears perked. Jack sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel like it might help him hold on to his resolve. He wasn't good at this. Not back then, not now. But some stories won't let you stay silent even if you spent years trying to bury them. He stepped out and walked up the stone path to the porch. Before he could knock, the door opened. Claire stood there barefoot in jeans and a flannel shirt, cradling a cup of tea like it was armor. Her eyes scanned his face, already knowing more than he wanted to admit. "I thought you might come back," she said softly. Jack offered a faint smile. "You always were good at reading people." "I worked in a library. Remember, reading's my job." He looked past her shoulder. "Got a minute for you," she said, stepping aside. "Always." The inside of the cottage was warm and filled with the quiet chaos of a life being lived. Books stacked on every surface, a quilt half-finished over the back of a couch, a kettle humming on the stove. Jack stood awkwardly near the doorway until Claire motioned him to the table. She poured him a cup of tea and slid it across the table without asking. He didn't drink it. "I need to ask you something," he said, voice low. Claire sat across from him, hands folded. "Was it for her?" Jack asked. "The crib." Did he know? Claire blinked. For a moment she said nothing. Then he knew enough to hope. Jack swallowed hard. "Sarah never told him. I didn't either. We lost touch before I even saw the baby." Claire nodded slowly. She came back to town for a little while after the separation. Quiet. Broken. I ran into her at the market. She didn't say much, but she had a baby girl with her, maybe 6 months old. Big brown eyes. Same kind of silence your dad had. Jack's jaw tightened. "You think he saw her?" "I know he did," Claire said. "I saw them once on the dock. He wasn't holding her, just standing a few feet away like he didn't want to scare her." Sarah didn't stop him. She let him stand there. Jack leaned back, breath leaving him all at once. He never said a word. Claire gave a soft, sad smile. Henry Turner never said much, but everything he felt he carved into that workshop. Jack stared at the floor. "I keep thinking about all the things I never said. All the years I threw away because I thought I knew him." Claire reached across the table and touched his hand. "You were a kid, Jack. You survived the only way you knew how. So did he." He looked up, eyes glassy. "I want to finish it. The crib. But I don't know if it's too late." "Too late is just what we tell ourselves when we're afraid of what forgiveness might cost," she said. "But it's never too late to do the right thing, even if it's quiet, even if it hurts." Jack nodded slowly. "Do you know where Sarah is?" Claire hesitated, then stood. She walked to a drawer and pulled out a worn envelope. "She left this with me. Said if you ever came back and if you asked, I could give it to you." Jack took the envelope. It was sealed but unmarked. He stared at it for a long time, then slipped it into his jacket without opening it. "She ever mention her name?" he asked. "The baby," Claire smiled, eyes misting. "Her name's Lily." Lily. The name hit him like a hammer to the chest, simple, soft, and entirely real. She would have been about 7 now, Claire added gently. Jack looked out the window where the trees swayed gently against the pale sky. I don't know if I have a right to show up after all this time. Claire tilted her head. Then don't show up for yourself. Show up for her. For Lily. Show up because silence doesn't protect anyone. Jack exhaled. That sounds like something he would have said. She laughed quietly. No. Henry would have said something gruff and confusing like, wood doesn't lie. But he'd have meant the same thing. Jack Rose tea untouched. I'm gonna finish that crib, he said. I'm gonna do it right. Claire nodded, pride flickering in her eyes. Then you're not the man who left. You're the man who came back. As he stepped onto the porch, the sun finally broke through the clouds, lighting the yard in soft gold. Ranger jumped up, tail wagging ready. Jack climbed into the truck, started the engine, and glanced at the envelope sitting in his passenger seat. He didn't open it. Not yet. But he would. Because some truths aren't meant to stay sealed forever. The drive back to the house was quiet, but Jack's mind buzzed with thoughts louder than any engine. Lily. 7 years old. Brown eyes like his. Or maybe like Sarah's. Did she know about him? Had she asked? Had she ever wondered when he reached the house he went straight to the basement? The smell of sawdust had become something familiar now, like a language he was slowly relearning. He stood in front of the crib, blueprint in one hand, chisel in the other. Then he worked. Not to forget. Not to escape. To honor. To remember. To rebuild what silence had broken. Hour by hour, curve by curve, the lighthouse took shape on the headboard. He carved stars into the corners. A wave at the base. The initials LT, hidden delicately in the grain. The wood didn't lie. It never had. That night, Jack sat beside the crib calluses forming on his palms, eyes burning with exhaustion. The journal lay open beside him, pages turned to a note he hadn't seen before. If you ever read this, Jack, if you ever come back, just know that I never stopped building. Not because I thought you'd return, but because I needed to believe that someday, something I made would be enough. Jack closed the book and pressed his palm to the headboard of the crib. It is, he whispered. It's enough. The storm had passed. But morning hadn't come yet. And before it did, there was one more truth waiting at the edge of everything. He reached for the envelope. And finally, he opened it. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, as if every word inside carried the weight of a life Jack had never dared to reach for. He sat alone at the workbench, the smell of pine and cedar lingering in the air, his hands still dusted with wood shavings from the crib. Ranger slept nearby, curled into the warm belly of silence that had become sacred between them. Jack stared at the envelope a long time before finally tearing the seal with slow fingers. Inside was a single letter, folded once. No photos, no fluff. Just words written in Sarah's precise, looping handwriting. He unfolded it. Jack, I don't know if you'll ever see this. I don't know if you'll ever care to. But I had to try. I didn't leave because I hated you. I left because I couldn't keep carrying your silence and my own grief at the same time. We lost more than each other. We lost the idea of who we thought we were going to be. You weren't ready to be a father, and I wasn't ready to be alone while pretending we were fine. But she came anyway. Her name is Lily. She has your stubborn eyes and your quiet. And she's funny. God, she's funny in that way you never let yourself be. She loves the ocean. She talks to the wind, and sometimes when she stares off at nothing, I wonder if she's talking to ghosts. Your father found us once on the dock. He didn't speak, just looked at her like he was memorizing something he'd never see again. He left a wooden seagull carved by hand in the mailbox the next day. No note, no name. But I knew. I didn't tell Lily about you yet. Not because I want to erase you, but because I wanted her to know joy before she knew disappointment. If you're reading this, maybe that means you came back. And if that's true, Jack, then maybe you're finally ready to be known. She deserves to know you, but only if you're ready to stay. Sarah Jack stared at the page, blinking against the burn behind his eyes. The room felt smaller now, closer. He stood, walked to the open basement door, and climbed the stairs into the kitchen, the letter clenched in his hand. His mind played Sarah's words on a loop, each line scraping across something brittle inside him. If you're reading this, maybe that means you came back. He had. But now what? Outside the sky was bruised with dusk. The tide had rolled back, revealing jagged rocks below the bluff. Wind brushed the side of the house, whispering against the window panes like voices left behind. Jack stepped onto the porch and sat on the top step. Ranger followed, nudging his shoulder with a cold nose. "You think I can fix this?" he asked, not expecting an answer. The dog rested his head on Jack's boot. Jack looked out toward the lighthouse in the distance, blinking steadily like it had always done, guiding the lost, even when they didn't know they were drifting. For so long, he thought building distance would protect the people he cared about. But distance wasn't the cure. It was the disease. And now he understood what his father had meant when he wrote, "Some things can only be repaired by hands that know how to hurt." He was one of those hands now, and he had work to do. The next morning, Jack rose before the sun. He opened the doors to the workshop and let the cool air roll through, clearing the dust and the ghosts. He lit the hanging bulb, rolled up his sleeves, and got to work. Every curve of the crib came to life beneath his hands. The chisel no longer fought him. The wood no longer resisted. It welcomed him. The unfinished lighthouse on the headboard gained depth. The little stars above it found their shine. The base, once rough, was now smooth and firm. He carved Lily's name on the underside of the headboard where no one would see it, unless they went looking. Not for show, for truth, for legacy. By the time the sun rose full over the horizon, Jack stepped back and let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It was finished. Not perfect, but honest. Built by two men who'd never learned how to say "I love you," so they said it with wood and time instead. He cleaned the tools, wiped down the bench, and stood for a moment in silence, feeling his father in the room more clearly now than he ever had while the man was alive. Later that afternoon, Jack drove back to town. Not to run, but to find her. Claire met him at the library again, this time with no questions, just quiet support. She handed him a slip of paper with an address scrawled in ink. "She's staying at her aunt's cottage near the cove," she said. "Lily likes to play in the tide pools." Jack tucked the paper into his pocket. "You sure I should do this?" he asked. "No," Claire said honestly. "But you already know you will, so go slow, be honest. Don't show up with a hammer, show up with your heart." Jack nodded, then leaned in and hugged her. The first real hug he'd given anyone in over a decade. She hugged him back without hesitation. "You look more like him now," she whispered. "I feel more like me," he replied. The drive to the cove took 15 minutes, long enough for nerves to build short enough that he couldn't back out. When he pulled up to the small cottage near the cliffside, his hands were shaking on the wheel. He stepped out, clutching nothing but the courage to face what came next. In the distance, a little girl played in the tide pools, her hair tied in a loose ponytail, skipping barefoot across the rocks. She had a stick in one hand and was poking at a crab, her laugh drifting up like wind chimes. Jack didn't move closer. Not yet. From the porch, Sarah stepped out, arms folded, watching him. She looked older, stronger, but there was still softness in her face. He raised a hand in quiet greeting. She didn't smile, but she didn't turn away either. He reached into the passenger seat of his truck, lifted the finished crib gently from the blanket and carried it toward the porch. When he got close, he said quietly, "I wasn't there when I should have been. But I'm here now, and this is a start." Sarah stared at the crib, her lips parting slightly. She reached out her fingers, brushing the wood, and for a long second she didn't say anything. Then softly she talks to the stars at night, says someone's listening. Maybe she's been right all along. Jack looked past her toward the girl in the tide pools. Lily turned around, and for a moment their eyes met brown to brown. Then she smiled, and something inside Jack broke open, not with pain, with light. The next morning, Jack stood outside the cottage again, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, the ocean wind brushing against his neck. He watched as Sarah packed a beach bag while Lily danced around her barefoot, singing to herself in some improvised melody that made no sense but sounded like freedom. Jack hadn't slept, not out of restlessness, out of awe. After Lily's smile yesterday, something shifted. A door he never knew was locked had cracked open inside him. The moment had been brief, delicate, but real, and real was rare in Jack's life. Sarah noticed him and gave a quick nod, subtle, cautious, but not unwelcome. He took it as permission. Lily spotted him next and waved both arms like she was trying to lift a plane off the ground. Jack waved back, tentatively. She ran up to him, stopping just short. "Hi, hey," he said, voice rougher than intended. "Nice crab pool you had going yesterday." She squinted at him. "You watched, yeah," Jack said. "You've got good instincts." "That crab didn't stand a chance." Lily grinned, missing one of her front teeth. "I named him Gary. He was grumpy." Jack chuckled. "That happens when you get poked with a stick." Sarah joined them, slinging the beach bag over her shoulder. "We're headed to Driftwood Beach. Tide's out early today." Jack glanced at her, uncertain. "Mind if I tag along?" She hesitated. "Just a flicker. Then if Lily's okay with it." Lily nodded, already tugging at his hand. "You can help me find starfish, but no picking them up. They get scared." "Got it," Jack said. "Strict observation only." They walked the short trail to the beach together, Jack quietly memorizing every second. The cliffs loomed on one side, waves rolling in soft and steady on the other. Seaweed lined the edges like discarded ropes from a forgotten ship. Gulls circled overhead, their cries sharp and distant. Lily ran ahead, skipping from rock to rock like she belonged to the earth in a way Jack had never known. He hung back with Sarah. "She's everything he said." "She's 7, Sarah replied, smiling softly. "So she's everything and exhausting." Jack breathed in the salt air. "You did good." Sarah didn't answer immediately. "You weren't ready back then, but you came back." "That's not nothing." He looked at her. "I should have come sooner." She stopped, turned to face him fully. "But you didn't. And now you're here. So either keep holding the past like a shield, or start showing up for her now." Jack nodded, absorbing the words like carved truths in wood grain. They reached the rocks where tide pools gathered tiny worlds of color and motion. Lily was already crouched by one, pointing excitedly. "Dad, look, it's a baby jellyfish." Jack froze. Sarah turned sharply. Lily blinked. "You are my dad, right?" Jack crouched beside her, eyes soft. "Yeah, kiddo, I am." She nodded once, satisfied, then returned to her jellyfish. Jack sat there in stunned silence, his heart pounding, something tectonic shifting inside him. Sarah knelt nearby. She's always known there was someone missing. She just didn't have the name for it until yesterday. Jack whispered, "That's the first time anyone's called me that." Sarah looked at him, eyes softening. "Get used to it." They stayed on the beach for hours. Jack showed Lily how to skim stones, helped her build a seaweed crown, and even carried her on his shoulders when she got tired. Her laughter wrapped around him like rope strong grounding. When the sun started to dip, they headed back. Lily dozed off in the back seat, and Jack sat in the front with Sarah, both quiet, in the golden hush of the evening. Back at the cottage, Sarah carried Lily inside while Jack lingered by the porch, unsure if the magic would break once the door closed behind them. Sarah came back out, arms crossed against the wind. "You can stay for dinner, if you're hungry." Jack looked at her. "Always." They ate simply grilled cheese, tomato soup, slices of apple. Jack sat across from Lily, who asked about everything from military boots to seagulls to how many clouds fit in a sky. When she asked if he had any pets, Jack grinned. "I've got a dog named Ranger." Her eyes lit up. "Can I meet him soon?" Jack promised. "He's a good listener and he doesn't mind being poked." Lily giggled. After dinner, Jack helped clean up and the rhythm felt startlingly normal, like a family. Sarah leaned against the counter watching him dry dishes. "I'm not saying this is easy," she said, "and I'm not pretending everything gets fixed overnight. But if you want this, if you're really in, then be in." Jack set down the towel. "I want this. I want both of you." She studied him, searching for cracks. He let her see all of them. Finally, she nodded. "Then be here tomorrow. And the day after, I will." She stepped forward, eyes serious. "Not for me. For her. Because she's already started letting you in. And if you disappear now, I won't." Jack said, "Not this time." A long pause passed between them, a silent contract signed in the soft clink of dishes and the hum of a quiet home. When Jack left that night, the stars had come out, and the lighthouse blinked slow and steady in the distance. He drove back to the house with the windows down, the air sharp alive. And when he got there, he walked straight to the basement. The crib stood waiting. But now it wasn't just a monument to loss or guilt. It was a promise. Jack reached into the journal, turned to the last blank page, and began to write. "Lily likes the tide pools. She talks about starfish like old friends. She called me Dad today. I didn't know how much I needed to hear it until she said it. I'm staying. This time I'm building forward." He set the pen down. Tomorrow he'd bring Ranger to meet her, and maybe, just maybe, he'd start carving something new, something made not of memory, but of presence. The next morning, Jack pulled into the gravel driveway with Ranger in the passenger seat, tail thumping against the glove box. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that softened edges and made the ocean look like it was holding its breath. Jack's stomach churned, not from nerves, but from something deeper, anticipation wrapped in fear. He hadn't come to just visit anymore. He came to stay. Ranger leapt out as soon as the door opened, nose to the ground, sniffing every blade of seagrass like it might hold a secret. Jack gave a short whistle, and the dog obediently circled back. He knocked once on the cottage door. Sarah answered with a towel slung over one shoulder, her sleeves pushed up, hair a bit damp from the morning. She looked like she hadn't expected him this early, and she hadn't. "You brought backup," she said, eyes dropping to Ranger, who was already sitting politely beside Jack. "Seemed like time for proper introductions," Jack said. "He's house-trained, I promise. Better than I was at his age." Behind her, Lily's voice rang out. "Is that him?" Sarah stepped aside and Lily barreled forward, arms wide. She didn't go for Jack, she went straight to Ranger. "Oh my gosh, he's huge," she shouted. "Does he bite?" "Only if you're made of steak," Jack said, "or squirrels." Lily knelt down and let Ranger sniff her hands. The dog responded with a lick to her cheek, and she squealed with delight. Sarah stepped out, arms folded, watching them with a quiet expression Jack couldn't quite place. Maybe curiosity, maybe concern. They spent the morning together. Lily gave Ranger a full tour of the backyard, including the fairy fort she'd built from driftwood and seashells. Jack followed by hands in pockets, giving them space. Every so often, Lily would glance back to make sure he was still there. He always was. Later, while Lily napped inside, Jack and Sarah sat on the porch with mugs of coffee between them, the kind of silence that wasn't awkward, just lived in. Sarah was the one who broke it. She's starting to ask real questions now. About where you've been. About why you're just showing up now. Jack nodded. "I figured that was coming. She doesn't know how to be angry with you yet. But she will. And when she is, what then?" Jack looked out toward the ocean. "Then I'll stay anyway." Sarah studied him, her voice steady but sharp. "You don't just get to walk in and be the hero. This isn't a story you fix with a few sweet moments and a finished crib." "I know," Jack said. "Believe me, I know." Sarah leaned forward. "Because the last time you left Jack, I had to clean up the silence you left behind. I carried it. Every day. Alone. That won't happen again." Jack met her eyes. "It won't." She didn't blink. "Convince me." He nodded once, slow. "I will. Not with words. Just give me time." Before she could respond, the screen door creaked open. Mom, Lily called. "Aunt Rachel's here." Sarah stood suddenly stiff. "Great." Jack frowned. "Everything okay?" Sarah turned halfway, shoulders tense. "She's protective." Rachel appeared a moment later, walking up the steps with a small tray of Tupperware and a face like she already hated whatever was about to happen. She spotted Jack. "Well, so it's true." Jack stood. "You must be Rachel, and you must be the ghost who thinks he can show up and play dad like this is some kind of Hallmark movie." Jack opened his mouth, then closed it again. Sarah stepped between them, tone firm. "Rachel!" "No," Rachel snapped. "You told me if he ever came back, you'd be cautious. You'd protect Lily, and now I come over with muffins, and he's out here like nothing happened." Jack cleared his throat. "I don't expect anyone to forget. Or forgive me overnight." Rachel crossed her arms. "Good. Because I haven't. You want to impress me, stick around. Otherwise, keep walking." Jack didn't flinch. "I plan to stay." Rachel narrowed her eyes. "We'll see." She turned and headed inside, letting the screen door slap shut behind her. Jack let out a slow breath. "That went well." Sarah gave him a sideways look. That was better than I expected, honestly. He gave a wry smile. That says a lot. They didn't talk much after that. Jack helped Sarah clean up the porch while Lily and Rachel played cards inside. Before he left, he turned to Sarah. I meant it, he said. I'm not here for a chapter. I'm here for the whole book. Sarah didn't smile, but she didn't shut the door either. That night, Jack returned to the Turner house. He lit a fire in the old wood stove, made himself a sandwich, and sat with his journal. He flipped to a fresh page. Sarah's not buying it. Rachel sure as hell isn't. But Lily is watching me. Every minute I'm here, she looks over her shoulder to make sure I haven't disappeared. She doesn't need perfect. She needs present. He closed the book, the fire popping softly beside him. The house didn't feel so hollow anymore. Not because it was full, but because for the first time in years, Jack was. A few days passed. Jack came by the cottage every morning. Sometimes he helped Sarah in the garden. Sometimes he just sat on the beach while Lily tried to teach ranger tricks with seaweed. He didn't push. He didn't force. He just stayed. Until the day Lily fell. It happened fast. One moment she was climbing the rocks near the bluff trail. The next, Jack heard her scream. By the time he reached her, she was curled on the ground, clutching her ankle, tears streaking her face. Jack scooped her up without thinking. I've got you, sweetheart. You're okay. I've got you. She buried her face into his shoulder, sobbing. Sarah met them at this cottage, panic etched into her expression. Jack gently laid Lily on the couch, while Sarah examined the swollen ankle. Sprain, probably. We'll get it looked at, she said, brushing hair from Lily's face. Jack sat on the edge of the couch, holding her hand the entire time. And when Lily finally looked at him, his eyes glassy and scared, she whispered, You didn't leave. Jack swallowed. Not this time. Not ever again. She nodded, squeezed his hand, and drifted to sleep. Sarah pulled him aside. You didn't hesitate. Jack shook his head. There was nothing else to do. Sarah looked at him for a long time, then nodded slowly. No, there wasn't. The late September wind rolled in heavy off the Atlantic, rattling the windows of the Turner house as Jack sorted through the last of the boxes in the attic. Dust clung to his sleeves, and the air smelled of cedar and something older, something buried. He'd been working non-stop, not just on the house, but on himself, trying to make room for a version of his life that didn't include hiding from the past. He was up there to clean, to clear out. But as he shifted, an old trunk pushed deep behind a beam, he noticed something strange. A floorboard slightly raised, as if it had been pried open once long ago and never quite put back right. Curiosity, or maybe fate, nudged him closer. He knelt and worked the edge with a screwdriver until the board groaned and gave. Beneath it, wrapped in a cracked leather belt, was a small bundle, a notebook stiff with time and stained in the corners, and a cloth pouch filled with tiny carved trinkets, birds, stars, and one small lighthouse. He carried it all downstairs in silence, setting it carefully on the kitchen table like it might fall apart if he moved too fast. The notebook wasn't Henry's woodworking journal. This was something else. He opened it, breath catching in his throat. It was a journal written in his father's hand, but not about plans or projects. It was about Grace. It was about Jack. And it was filled with grief. You can't build a family with silence. You carve love with what you say, not just what you do. The words weren't dated, but they bled emotion. Page after page, his father poured out the things he never spoke aloud. Regrets, apologies, hopes he never dared share. Grace. I sat beside your bed last night while Jack slept down the hall. You didn't stir. The nurses said you might not again. I carved a bird today just to keep my hands moving. I wonder if Jack will remember your laugh. I don't know how to be a father without you. I barely knew how to be a man. Jack, today you turned 9. You asked me if Mom would ever come home. I told you the truth and I watched something behind your eyes go quiet. I want to go back and lie to you instead. I want to give you one more day where everything felt safe. Jack sat with the journal until the sun shifted across the kitchen floor and the house fell into shadow. He didn't cry. Not right away. But when he did, it came from somewhere deep grief, not just for his father, but for the years between them, lost to misunderstanding. The man he hated had been trying in the only way he knew how. Later that night, Jack brought the journal to Sarah. She was on the porch reading with a blanket across her lap. Lily was already asleep inside the hush of the cove, evening soft around them. Jack didn't say a word. He handed her the notebook and sat down beside her. She opened it, flipping carefully through the fragile pages. When she reached a passage written just after Lily was born, she stilled. I saw her. Just once. A glimpse of that baby girl in Sarah's arms. My hands shook for an hour afterward. She looked like Jack. That same stare. I wanted to step forward, but all I could hear was my own failure. So I left a carved gull in their mailbox and walked away. Maybe that's the closest I'll get to redemption. Sarah exhaled, her voice barely a whisper. He watched from a distance. All that time. Jack nodded. He was never cruel. Just wounded. She closed the book gently and rested it in her lap. What do you want to do with it? I think Lily should have it someday, Jack said. So she knows the silence didn't mean she wasn't loved. Sarah looked at him. And what about you? I needed to know. Jack said. That he saw me. That he tried. I spent so long hating him because I thought he didn't care. Turns out he cared so much it broke him. Sarah reached over and placed her hand on his. Then maybe it's time to stop carrying his silence. He looked at her. I don't want to become him. You're not, she said. You're here. They sat there for a while longer. No need to fill the silence now, it wasn't empty anymore. The next morning, Jack started work on the upstairs bedroom, the one he used to call his as a boy. He cleared out the old dresser, peeled off the faded wallpaper, and opened the windows to let the sea air in. He didn't ask Sarah. He just did it. Because even if Lily never stayed overnight, even if she only visited now and then, she needed to know there was a room waiting, a place that was hers. He painted the walls soft blue and built a bookshelf from scratch. On the top shelf, he placed one of Henry's little wooden birds. At the base of the window, he carved a name with care, Lily. That night, he picked Lily up from the cottage and brought her over. She limped through the hallway, still favoring her ankle ranger at her side like a bodyguard. When she reached the door to the room, Jack opened it. It's not perfect, he said. But it's yours, if you want it. Lily stepped inside and looked around. She ran her hand along the edge of the bookshelf, touched the little bird, then walked to the window. She spotted her name carved below the sill and turned to him. Did you make this for me? Jack nodded. Yeah, I did. She crossed the room and hugged him. Not a quick, casual hug, a full-bodied, fierce one. I want to sleep here one day, she whispered. When I'm not scared, you'll be gone in the morning. Jack closed his eyes. You take all the time you need, he said. I'll be here. Later, after Sarah came to walk her home, Jack sat alone in the room and looked out at the moon hanging low over the ocean. He opened Henry's journal again and flipped to a blank page in the back. Lily walked into the room today and made it hers. She asked me if I made it for her. I didn't know how to say that everything I'm building now, every piece, every nail, every word is for her. I didn't get to be the man I wanted to be for my father, but I'm going to be that man for my daughter. He closed the journal and placed it gently on the shelf next to the bird. He didn't need to be haunted anymore. He was home. The morning fog rolled in from the bay like a secret, soft and slow, muting the world in gray. Jack stood on the back porch of the Turner house, coffee in hand, watching as Ranger padded silently across the wet grass. The house was quieter than usual, and the silence felt heavier not from loneliness, but from anticipation. Something was shifting. He could feel it in his bones. The room upstairs was finished. Lily had left her stuffed owl on the bed last night, after visiting again like she was testing the waters. She hadn't taken it home. That meant something. Jack stepped inside just as his phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Sarah. "Can we talk, just the two of us? Come by." He stared at the words for a long moment before grabbing his keys. When he pulled into the driveway of the cottage, Sarah was already on the porch. She wasn't smiling. He killed the engine and stepped out, his boots crunching against the gravel. The wind tugged at his jacket. She nodded toward the chairs. "Let's sit." Jack joined her. No coffee this time. No easy warmth between them. Just wind and waves in the distance. Sarah took a breath, steady but deep. "I've been watching you." Jack looked at her, waiting. "You've done the right things," she continued. "You show up. You listen. You built her a room. You've given her something to look forward to." Jack nodded once. "That's what I want." Sarah's eyes flicked toward him sharp. "Then prove it." Jack tilted his head. "Haven't I been? I'm not talking about days, Jack. I'm talking about permanence. She's already imagining you in her future. Are you her?" He went still. She didn't flinch. It's not enough to show up for a season and leave with the first storm. I won't let her learn to expect that. Jack swallowed. "I'm not leaving." Sarah leaned in. "Then what's your plan, and you staying in the Turner house for good? You going to pick up work around here? Or are you going to wait for something to pull you back out again?" He didn't answer. Not right away. Because she was right, he hadn't made that decision. Not completely. "Jack," she said, quieter now. "You have to choose. You can't keep standing in the doorway of your own life." He looked at her, really looked. The woman who had raised their daughter alone, who had carried silence and uncertainty for years, who still had the strength to let him back in, not for herself, but for Lily. "I thought coming back was the choice," Jack said. Sarah shook her head. "Coming back is easy. Staying is hard. Staying means roots. Staying means risk." He looked away, jaw tightening. She leaned back in her chair, letting the words land. "I'm not pushing you out. But I won't pretend it's okay to let her dream about a life with you if you're only here part-time in your heart." Jack stared out at the trees swaying beyond the road. "I used to think I didn't belong anywhere. I thought silence meant safety, that if I kept moving, nothing could hurt me." Sarah didn't speak, but now he continued, "I don't want to move anymore. I want to build. Not just furniture. Not just her room. I want to build a life. Here." Sarah's eyes softened, but she wasn't ready to let him off the hook. "So what does that look like?" Jack took a breath. "It looks like taking over the shop in town. Like setting up real work. Like finishing the fence at the Turner house. Like walking Lily to school. He turned to her. It looks like asking you what you need instead of assuming I know. A long pause stretched between them. Sarah's shoulders dropped just slightly. That's the first real plan I've heard from you, she said. I mean it, Jack said. All of it. She looked at him, and for the first time in days, she smiled not wide but warm. Then tell her, she said. Tell Lily. She deserves to hear it from you. Later that afternoon, Jack picked Lily up from school. Her limp was mostly gone, but she still held his hand tightly as they walked. Want to stop by the cove before heading home, he asked. She beamed. Yes, they sat on the rocks together, Ranger lying beside them, the sea stretching out in soft waves. Jack watched her for a long time before speaking. Lily, he said, I need to tell you something important. She looked up, curious but calm. I'm not just here for a visit, he said. I'm not just fixing up the house. I'm not going anywhere. Her brow furrowed. You're staying for good, he said. I'm going to live here, in town. I'm going to build a workshop and maybe even coach Little League if they'll let me. And your room, that's just the beginning. She didn't speak. Her eyes studied his face with surprising seriousness for a 7-year-old. You're really staying? She asked again. I am. Lily blinked, then flung her arms around his neck. Promise, Jack hugged her tight. Promise. After a long silence, she whispered into his shirt, Do you think Grandpa Henry would be proud? Jack's throat tightened. I think he said he'd be proud of both of us. That night, Jack stood in the Turner house looking out over the water. The stars had returned. The fog had lifted. He pulled Henry's journal from the shelf and added one final entry. I made a choice today, not just to stay, but to belong. I used to think this house was a ghost. Now I see it for what it is, the start of something. I thought I was rebuilding what I lost. But maybe I'm building something new. As he closed the journal, he felt something settle in his chest. A steadiness, a certainty. You don't build a life by returning, he whispered. You build it by remaining. Tomorrow he'd start on the shop renovation. He'd call the county register a business name. Maybe even put up a sign, Turner & Son Woodworks. Not because he had to, because he finally wanted to. The bell above the door gave a soft jingle as Jack stepped into the old shop on Main Street. Dust motes swirled in the shafts of morning light, slicing through the front windows. The building had been vacant for years, but Jack saw something else potential. Purpose. A blank canvas. He exhaled slowly and crossed the floor boots, echoing on worn wood. Ranger padded behind him, sniffing around the corners like he was inspecting the place himself. Jack paused in the center of the room, pulling out the set of keys the landlord had handed him 2 days earlier. He turned in a slow circle, imagining workbenches lining the walls, shelves stacked with hand tools, the steady hum of saws and the scent of sawdust in the air. This was it. The first real step into permanence. He ran his hand along the nearest wall, voice low but certain. Let's build something worth staying for. He got to work. Days passed in a blur of repairs and restoration. He tore out warped shelving, rewired outdated lighting, and patched holes in the walls. With each nail, he drove with every board he replaced. Jack could feel the foundation inside himself strengthening. But as with all things, peace never came without interruption. It started with a phone call from Rachel. Sarah's sister rarely reached out directly. When her name lit up on Jack's screen, his stomach clenched. He answered on the third ring. Rachel. You need to get over to Sarah's. Now she said, clipped and urgent, "Lily's in the hospital." The world narrowed in an instant. He didn't ask for details. He just ran. By the time he arrived, Sarah was already in the ER waiting room, her face pale, eyes red. She stood when she saw him, and for a heartbeat, neither of them said a word. Then she collapsed during school, Sarah said, voice shaking. Fever spiked. They think it's a viral infection, maybe meningitis. They're running tests. Jack blinked, struggling to keep his voice steady. Is she awake? She was. She's scared. Jack reached out and took Sarah's hand. She didn't pull away. They sat like that for hours. Jack held back panic with discipline he hadn't used since Afghanistan. The waiting was worse than anything he'd endured in the field. Finally, a doctor appeared and walked them through a litany of tests and medical terms. It wasn't meningitis. It was a severe viral infection, but she was responding to treatment. She'd need to stay overnight, maybe longer. They were allowed in to see her just before midnight. Lily looked small in the hospital bed, her cheeks flushed and damp with sweat. An IV snaked into her arm. Machines beeped steadily beside her, but her eyes opened when she heard their voices. "Daddy," she whispered. Jack's knees nearly gave out. He sat beside her and took her hand gently. "I'm here," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." She tried to smile. "I had a dream you left." He leaned closer. "I didn't." "I won't." Sarah stood on the other side of the bed, brushing Lily's hair back gently. "You scared us, kiddo." Lily's eyes fluttered closed again. "Sorry." Jack stayed through the night, sleeping upright in a plastic chair beside her. Every time she stirred, he was there. Every time a nurse entered, he woke instantly. It wasn't even a decision, it was instinct. The next morning, Rachel brought them fresh clothes and coffee. "You look like hell," she told Jack. He gave her a half smile. "Feels about right." She looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. "I misjudged you." Jack blinked. "What?" Rachel shrugged. "I thought you were going to run again. But you didn't." He met her gaze. "I'm not built to leave anymore." She nodded slowly. "Good." Because Sarah and Lily deserve someone who stays, Jack stayed at the hospital for 2 more nights. When Lily's fever finally broke and she was cleared to go home, he carried her to the car himself. The scare had changed something. Not in a dramatic way, but in small, steady shifts. Sarah's walls lowered another inch. Rachel's tone softened when she spoke to him, and Lily held his hand a little tighter as they walked through the front door of the cottage. That night, after Lily was tucked into her bed and Sarah was finishing up dishes in the kitchen, Jack stepped outside into the salt breeze. The moon hung low, casting long shadows across the yard. Sarah joined him on the porch, arms crossed. She bounced back faster than I expected. "She's tougher than both of us combined," Jack said. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Sarah said, "When I called you, I didn't think you'd get there that fast." Jack turned to her. "She's my daughter." Sarah looked at him, eyes filled with something he hadn't seen before, not just trust, but hope. "You're proving it." Jack leaned against the porch rail, looking out at the dark. "I meant what I said. I'm building a life here, but this week made me realize something." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "It's not just about staying. It's about fighting to stay. Every single time something tries to pull me away, fear, pain, old habits, I have to choose to stay, actively, even when it's hard." She nodded slowly. "That's what real family is." Jack looked at her. Then I'm all in. Sarah studied him for a beat, then said, "Good, because the hardest part comes next." He frowned. "What do you mean?" She glanced back toward the house. "Telling Lily's school, making space for you in her routines, talking to people in town who haven't seen you in years." Jack exhaled. "Yeah, I figured." "You'll have to stand in it," she said. "Not just the good, all of it." Jack met her eyes. "I will." Later that night, back at the Turner house, Jack opened Henry's journal one more time. He added a short entry. "She got sick. We were scared. I didn't run, I stayed." Maybe being a father isn't about always knowing what to do. Maybe it's just about showing up even when you're scared, too. "Today I chose to stay. Again. And tomorrow I'll choose it all over." He closed the book and looked around the quiet house. Then he looked toward the shop keys on the counter. Tomorrow the sign went up. Turner and Son Woodworks. Not just a name, a declaration. The first snowfall of the season came quietly blanketing the town in soft, white silence. Jack stood outside Turner and Son Woodworks, looking up at the gentle flakes swirling beneath the glow of the shop's porch light. It had taken weeks of work to get the place ready, fresh paint, new signs, tools arranged just the way he liked. The carved wooden sign above the door caught the falling snow in its letters. His name was part of something now, something lasting. Inside the workshop smelled like cedar and varnish. A few early Christmas orders sat lined up on the finished table, a rocking horse for a new baby, a maple jewelry box, a hand-carved nativity scene. He ran his fingers over the edges of the rocking horse, smoothing out a final detail. His touch was different now, not just precise but personal. He didn't build just to shape wood anymore. He built to stay. He built to be remembered for more than absence. The bell above the door jingled and Jack turned just as Lily ran in, bundled in a red coat, cheeks flushed from the cold. "Uncle Hank let me leave school early," she announced, grinning. Behind her, Sarah stepped inside, brushing snow from her scarf. The principal said she was ahead in reading. Figured she earned a half day. Jack smiled. "That right," Lily beamed. "I came to help." Jack set down his chisel and wiped his hands on a cloth. "Then come on, Assistant Turner." She giggled and climbed up onto the stool beside his workbench. Ranger curled up nearby, content in the warmth of the shop. Jack handed Lily a small piece of sandpaper. "Smooth the edges on this one. Gentle pressure. Like I showed you." Lily got to work, tongue poking out in concentration. Sarah walked around the shop, touching the finished pieces, admiring the craftsmanship. "It feels different in here," she said. "Lived in." Jack glanced around. "Feels like mine now." Sarah smiled. "That's because it is." For a while they all worked in companionable silence. Snow tapped against the windows. The fireplace in the corner crackled. Then Jack walked over to a large cloth-covered object at the back of the shop. "I've been saving this for today," he said. Lily turned wide-eyed. "What is it?" Jack tugged off the cloth with a smooth motion. Underneath stood a wooden cradle sanded to a perfect sheen, its edges carved with ocean waves and soaring birds. But what made it unique was the inscription burned into the curved footboard. "For every generation we couldn't hold, but never stopped loving." Sarah's hand went to her mouth. "Jack." Jack looked at both of them. "It's based on the one Dad was building. I used his designs, his tools, but I finished it for Lily, and for every Turner who came before." He paused. "I didn't just want to fix what was broken. I wanted to build something that would last longer than all the silence, Lily walked up to the cradle and ran her fingers along the carved edge. "Will I sleep in it?" she asked. Jack crouched beside her. "You're too big now," he said with a smile. "But maybe one day, your baby will." Lily's eyes widened. "That's forever." "Exactly," he said. Sarah stepped forward and laid her hand on the curve of the wood. Her voice was soft. "He would have been proud, Jack." Jack swallowed the knot rising in his throat. "I think he was just lost. I think we both were." She looked at him, eyes clear. "But you found your way back." He nodded. "And this time I didn't take the long way home." That night they all gathered for dinner at the cottage. Jack cooked his mother's old chili recipe with cornbread on the side. The kitchen was warm with laughter and clinking dishes, the kind of simple noise that fills a home with something real. After Lily went to bed, Sarah poured 2 mugs of tea and joined Jack on the porch. Snow still fell, but it was light now, just a whisper. They sat in silence for a while, wrapped in blankets, shoulder to shoulder. "I used to think healing was about going back," Jack said, "finding the beginning and trying to change it." Sarah listened. "But it's not," he continued. "Healing is about looking at where you are, who you've become, and deciding to stay, to build forward, not backward." She turned toward him. "So what are you building next?" Jack smiled. "A life, day by day, moment by moment, with you, with her, with all of this." Sarah leaned into him. "Then let's build it well." They sat that way until the stars emerged clean and bright against the cold sky. No ghosts, no regrets, just breath and love and the sound of new memories being made. Weeks later, Jack opened Turner & Son for its official grand opening. The whole town showed up. Old friends, curious strangers, even people he thought would never forgive his absence. They came, and they stayed. Jack gave a short speech, awkward but heartfelt, his voice catching only once when he mentioned Henry. He wasn't always easy to understand, Jack said, but he loved with everything he had. He just didn't know how to say it out loud. "So I'm saying it for both of us. Now we're here and we're not going anywhere." Applause. A few tears. And when the ribbon was cut, Jack looked up at the sign one more time. Turner & Son. But this time the son wasn't just him. It was everyone who came next. That night back at home, Jack stood in the doorway of Lily's room. She was asleep, arms wrapped around ranger hair, tousled across the pillow. He stepped inside, pulled the covers gently up around her, and kissed her forehead. Then he whispered, "You're safe. You're seen. You're loved." He turned off the light and closed the door, not all the way, just enough to let the light in. Because some doors once opened should never close again.